Welcome to episode 379 of the Postal Hub podcast. I'm Ian Kerr. President Trump has decided to suspend duty-free de minimis for the USA, effective from the 29th of August. So what happens next? What do postal operators and e-commerce retailers need to do? Well, joining me in a moment is Aaron Bezzant, Head of Supply Chain at Zonos. We'll discuss the background to the President's executive order, what it means for e-commerce and the postal world, and what steps need to be taken to be compliant. This special episode of the Postal Hub podcast is sponsored by Zonos, and it's relevant to every postal operator in the world, big or small. Joining me on the line is Aaron Bezzant. Aaron is Head of Supply Chain at Zonos. Aaron, welcome. We're going to get stuck into one of the biggest topics in the delivery world right now, which is de minimis. And there's been a big announcement out of the USA and some big deadlines coming up. So I'll let you start by painting the picture. What's been announced with regard to US de minimis, and what's our deadline?
Yeah, so starting August 29th. So this executive order came out and gave 30-day notice that de minimis would be going away for everything. That means all shipments coming into the U.S. under $800 is now going to have duty due. Previously, it was only the shipments over 800 would have duty, but now it's everything. This has actually been a phased approach. So the de minimis is already eliminated for Chinese-made goods. That happened just a couple months back. But this also isn't the first time they've tried to eliminate de minimis. They tried in February with an executive order. And honestly, this has been a bipartisan topic for years. In fact, the Big Beautiful Bill just came out. It's going to officially be eliminated in 2027 with that bill. But the administration doesn't want to wait for that. That's where an executive order is effectively expediting that process. But they tried eliminating it in February. And the postal stream was really the big hang up. Your commercial carriers have ways to collect duty at delivery at scale. They're doing it around the world. And so they're going to be able to respond and put the systems in place to deal with it. But the postal stream is a very manual process in the U.S. because there's just not much duty to be collected. And CBP, which is Customs and Border Protection here in the U.S., they're actually the ones writing the entries, and their process is pretty manual. And then USPS's collection process is pretty manual. So you can imagine when 99% of the shipments, or whatever that percentage is, never have duties due, piece of cake. You're only worrying about the high value shipments and you're ready to go. But when all of a sudden you have to collect duty on everything, things just jam up. And I think they had the de minimis eliminated. I think you measure it in hours, not days, back in February. And they finally had to come out with another executive order to say, all right, we're going to pause on that until systems are in place. Fast forward a little bit, and they came out with a new plan that said, we're going to put the burden for Chinese shipments coming from China Post and Hong Kong Post. We're going to put the burden on the carriers to actually be responsible for the collection of duty. And we're going to give them a simplified way to calculate the duties, because we know that this isn't necessarily what they do, is calculating based on HS codes, etc. So they gave them a really simple way to calculate and say, carriers, you just need to make sure everything coming into the U.S. from China and Hong Kong Post are paid. Now, these are your airlines that are sitting in the middle of the transaction. How many airlines do you think jumped on board to want to facilitate duty payment to CBP?
Is there a prize if I guess it correctly?
A pat on the back from someone in your household.
Oh, one? Oh, zero. Okay, well.
So shipments from China Post and Hong Kong Post to the U.S. don't exist right now. It just didn't work. But all the commercial carriers started collecting on shipments that have Chinese-made goods in them, and that's happening today. Now, everything made rest of world is still got an $800 de minimis right now. And if you think of, the administration is in the midst of adding tariffs and going through negotiations. If you've got an $800 de minimis, that's one of the highest ones in the world. So there was already a lot going on with people, let's just say, maximizing the opportunity due to that loophole, right? By parking inventory in Canada, Mexico, and just shipping everything low value across the border because there'd be zero duties. Now, if you increase the duties, the incentive to leverage that loophole just increases. So they had to shut down the de minimis. And also from a security standpoint, in this executive order, they've addressed some things on data requirements and things as well. And so that's where they came out with this executive order on the de minimis, which is now it's on August 29th, it's eliminated for the world, both postal and commercial. On the postal stream, they put the burden on the carriers again. So now, but they gave one out. They said, or a qualified third party in lieu of the transportation carrier. So now someone else could step in because the airlines are not willing to do it. They probably never will, but someone else could step in their place. And so that's one thing that's happening, but they only gave 30-day notice. And then also in the executive order, they do require some additional data elements like country of origin is the big one. That in the postal stream, it hasn't been required, but in the commercial stream, it is. Now that's a required data element. So the interesting thing about this is by eliminating the de minimis and then in postal putting the burden on the carriers or a third party, it's effectively mandating DDP on those shipments coming into the U.S. that are under $800.
Well, that's a lot to digest right there. I suppose if you're a postal operator listening to this and you think, right, I've got a limited amount of time now, that deadline is getting closer and closer. Mm-hmm. And you were just talking there about sort of how the problem's been addressed so far. So the problem, I mean, the new challenge of collecting the data and the actual, well, what do we call them? The tariff, the fee, the customs duty. What's the correct term? Yep. What are we collecting, and who are we remitting it to? Is sort of part of my question here. But I always start with a simple thing, with the big picture. Postal operators. How do postal operators start the journey to comply with this executive order, given that you've got basically until the 29th of August to get something up and running?
That's the $1 million question, right? So, and I did leave one caveat out. Bona fide gifts under $100 are still duty free. So they did. There's one small carve out for something that's
so like grandma sending something to grandchildren. You just have to make sure it's not, a pair of high end headphones or something. Right?
Bingo. Yeah, right. If grandma sends an iPhone to her grandson, there's going to get tariffs on it. So what they did is, once again, they came out with a simplified calculation for the tariffs on the postal stream starting August 29th. Commercial is just status quo on their calcs. It's just, hey, instead of having to collect on shipments over 800, now you have to collect tariffs on everything else. Business as usual for them, except for now the volume of tariffs they have to collect is much higher. In the postal stream, they now put the burden on the carrier or a third party, and they gave a simplified tariff that can be used for the time being. The entry process, I mentioned the CBP is the one that does the entries on all those ones that are over $800. It's actually a guy named Larry that uses a computer and types one finger. I'm not joking.
There's a guy called Larry.
And he's been there forever.
Well, shout out to Larry if you're listening. Keep up the good work, mate.
He's a legend. He is an absolute legend.
Keep taking the arthritis cream or whatever it is to keep the fingers moving.
Absolutely. Well, now they're like, well, we can't just put that big of a burden on Larry to have to write all these entries. So they've actually built this into two phases. So the first phase is we just got to get the airline carriers or the trucking companies that are bringing the mail items into the U.S. or a third party that's willing to act on their behalf to be willing to remit the funds to CBP, but we're not going to change the entry process. So everything under $800 is flowing in without an entry. An entry will not be required on August 29th, but remittance will be. And they came up with a simplified calculation for that and gave you two options. One is an outrageously high flat rate per parcel that's between $80 and $200 depending on the country of origin of the goods. So let's just make that a non-starter for now. But that'd be for if there was some carrier out there willing to do it and just wanted to charge a per piece rate, they could do that. But I don't see that one being adopted. And that one expires in 6 months. That can only be used for 6 months. The second one is it's a fixed rate based on the country of origin of the goods. It's a percentage of the value of the goods. So countries that could be anywhere from 10 to 15% or all the way up to 50+%, right? Just depending on the country of origin. And what it is actually based on the IEEPA rates. That's your emergency action tariffs. These are the new things Trump's putting in because of fentanyl and the emergency action, the security at the border, which means what you've got is the tariffs in the U.S. stack. Got your standard MFN rate, that's your typical duty rate, and then you've got all of these IEEPA rates to start tacking these reciprocal tariffs, right? You've also got the tariff for Chinese-made goods that was put in place back in 2018, and so you got multiple tariffs that'll stack on a shipment. In the commercial space, you're going to have everything. In the postal world, you won't have that standard MFN rate because that's based on an HS code, and they wanted to make it simple. So everything's just based on the country of origin. So you actually only get the emergency action, the IEEPA tariffs. So the tariff rate on the postal shipments will actually be slightly lower than in the commercial stream. So a small advantage for the postal stream for now. And so that's the way it's calculated. And then within the coming, I don't know, I would guess 6 months or so in the executive order, it says CBP will be coming up with a new entry process for these postal shipments. And that's to be determined. So no information on that. That's kind of a second phase of this. They're fixing the fiscal problem now, getting the money flowing, simplifying the process for the postal stream, allowing a third party to step in place of the carriers because the carriers haven't been willing to do it. And now it's a matter of that third party can collect those funds from the post sending it and get that remitted to CBP.
Again, there's a lot to digest here. Can I ask a couple of questions, a couple of follow-up questions, if I may? Because we've been talking in terms of international mail for the last probably 7 years since there was things like the Stop Act and various others, talking a lot about advanced electronic data.
Yep.
So this is part of it, right? We're still talking about this, getting the data right, but now there's an added element, which is the duty, for want of a better word. And that's going to be collected, well, it's going to be remitted, you were saying, by the carrier or a third party. Am I getting that right?
Yep.
But so if I'm shopping online and I'm buying from a web shop I'm living in the USA, I'm shopping from a shop in Canada, but who's going to be paying the fee? Or is that still unclear? If it's a customer or the e-commerce retailer, or is that even a relevant question, I suppose, at this point?
Well, it comes down to there's a lot of decisions that have to be made along the way. So let's say the post has to find a carrier or third party that's willing to facilitate the remittance to CBP of their duties. And if they do, great. Post, the mail can keep moving. If they can't, it's going to stop. Because what's going to happen is if the airline carrier is not willing and they're not feeling comfortable with the third party that's willing to do it, they're not going to pick up the mail. That those parcels aren't moving to the U.S. So they have to have that in place. But now that third party or carrier is going to be looking to the post and saying, all right, well, you owe me this, because they're not collecting it on delivery. So the post is going to have to then turn around to their retailers and say, I'm going to be billing you for duty. And now the retailer then has to make a decision on
do we ease it or do we pass it on?
Exactly. Yeah. You got it.
Perhaps that really leads into the next question I want to ask, was really about this, the DDP. I think that's really what we're talking about. And then we were having a discussion before we hit record about whether DDP stands for delivery duty paid or delivered duty paid. And I'm not sure we came to a conclusion on that. But send us a message, everybody. If you think DDP is delivery duty paid or delivered duty paid, send us a message and we'll, I don't know. There's no prizes in this. It's just out of interest.
No.
So tell us about the implementation pathway. How do we get to this point where the DDP is going to be paid and we're all going to be happy?
Yeah, so this is where you're kind of passing the problem along, right? As we just went through the supply chain there, the problem just gets passed upstream, and then eventually it can get passed to the consumer at checkout if that merchant chooses to do so. And that's the game that Zonos has been in for the last 16 years, is helping e-commerce merchants to pre-collect their duties and taxes at checkout. That's kind of been our MO for a long time. Now, our products evolved, and now we're really just in the pre-collection of duty and taxes game, because what we've seen is a transition from the old school way of doing things like, hey, if I'm selling, you buy it for me and you're in Italy, and I'm going to ship it to you, and I might have a disclaimer on my website that says, Ian, good luck.
Sort it out yourself, mate. Good luck. Yeah.
Yep. It's on you, Ian, for those tennis shoes you just bought to know exactly how much VAT and what the duties are going to be. And that's not a realistic expectation to put on consumers in e-commerce. And especially as e-commerce has grown, you've seen a massive shift in evolution to the DDP experience where, hey, look, those duty and taxes are paid at checkout. Now, are they paid and displayed as a separate charge at checkout, along with shipping, or are they embedded in the product price? So that way they're just accounted for by the merchant. It doesn't really matter. It's avoiding that experience of someone thinks they bought their tennis shoes, they think the transaction's done, and then all of a sudden they get stuck with a bill that's not just the duties and VAT, but a massive fee from the carriers, because it's a lot of work and expense on their part to have to collect from you. And so avoiding that and creating a better buying experience has been a massive transition in e-commerce. And it just seems like every year more and more that becomes the norm and the expectation from consumers, which is why in the postal world, you've been seeing a big push for years now on building out that postal DDP network, because if you don't, all the commercial carriers have that functionality. And if you're lacking that feature, there's going to be just more and more e-commerce business that'll be shifting away from the postal stream.
And that's a really important point. You want to make sure that you're winning in e-commerce. If you're a postal operator, you want to be winning in e-commerce. And as a side note, who wants to be in the business of collecting money at the doorstep from the recipient, right?
Who wants to be in the business of collecting money at the doorstep from Americans? I'll tell you that. I wouldn't want to be in that business. So DDP into the U.S., I can tell you right now, even the commercial carriers, even if they can do DDU and collect at the door, it's not going to go well in the U.S. because we've had such a high de minimis for so many years. We don't understand tariffs. And it's going to just look like a scam email or a collection notice that we're going to get. And there's going to be a lot of rejections that are going to be happening at the door.
And that will then create another problem, as we've seen happen in other countries, where stuff gets sent back.
Yep.
And that creates more problems in a logistics sense. And that's without even getting me on my high horse about the environment of stuff being shipped around the world and then returned because nobody wants to pay the fee at the doorstep. Let's continue to talk about solutions, though, Aaron, because I want to talk a little bit more about this. How does Zonos manage this? How can Zonos get involved to help a post navigate not just this immediate deadline, but get that entire process worked out so that there's, it's I don't want to use the word seamless, but I'm trying to think of I can't think of a better word right now. But yeah, so it's going to work and you're not going to worry about it at night.
Yes. Well, this is where we put ourselves in a unique position for this opportunity of and we'll call it that, right? Like, I actually think this is an opportunity for the postal community in general, because you've got one of the biggest markets in the world that's effectively mandating DDP, and it's going to help expedite that process of building out PDDP around the world and just putting all the systems in place so that way the post can go out and win more e-commerce business, not just in the US, but other places. So I actually think it's an opportunity here. Where Zonos comes in is we're expecting to be that third party to help remit to CBP. I will caveat this. Here's the thing. We're sitting, what's the date today? It's August 11th. Up to this point, CBP has not offered guidance on how a carrier or third party is going to facilitate the remittance into the U.S. So clock's ticking. We are in regular communications in Washington, D.C. We've been out there a number of times over recent months. So we expect to be able to act as that third party to handle that remittance piece. On top of that, we also offer all of the tools to help posts to collect themselves from their business accounts. So if a post isn't ready to invoice for duties, they've never had to do it before, we can help with that. We can offer a service where we can collect on their behalf. This is what we've been doing forever, is collecting duties and taxes from businesses. So businesses can set up an account and we invoice their business accounts on their behalf for them. So that way they can keep packages moving, because clearly the 30 days is a very short window of time for anybody to comply to this. And then when you talk about your e-commerce merchants and the needs they have, At checkout, that's been our bread and butter forever. So, we've got Shopify plugins and APIs and things that merchants can use if they want to do an integration. But we also have some very simple tools that we're just offering to the post we're working with for free that they can hand out like candy to all of their e-commerce merchants to at least allow them to go into a dashboard of ours where they can say, here's my item. What's my U.S. duties I need to account for in my product, or to add at checkout, or whatever I need to do? Like, give them visibility and understanding of the costs they need to build in, or if they choose to absorb it, they at least need to know how much it's going to be. And so we're offering some simple tools that way. And then we do have some other cool little gadgets. Like, one that's amazing is if you go to the App Store, either on Google or on your iPhone. Wait, not Google. We'll call it Android, right? We have an app that's a cool little demo tool. And I don't know if you've played with it yet or not, but imagine if you're walking into a post office and you want to ship something internationally. The steps you have to go through, you have to fill out all this paperwork about what's in the box, all your customs forms, where, and all the details about where you're sending it, all of that. And then you can finally ship it. And you've been there for, half the day trying to get this all figured out and shipped to someone in another country, right? This app, you can just take a picture of the items that you're wanting to ship, and it'll create the customs declaration for you because it'll identify all the items. It'll classify them, give you the HTS code coming to the US or HS code in other places. It can give you an estimated value for it. So if you're not sure what to value something at, you pulled it off, out of your closet and ship it to someone. It can estimate the value for you. Can even tell you what the duties are going to be going into the US, and it actually could be used anywhere in the world. So think if you're a post and you want to embed that into your app and even collect the duties in that, and then you can tie that to your systems, which is something we're working with. We've been having a lot of conversations with the UPU and working with IPC and others too. On, if you could take that declaration data and populate it inside the postal stream, you could walk in with an ID or a QR code, and you took a picture of your items, and then a minute later, it populates all the paperwork, you pay, and you go, right? And it's absolutely a game changer from, taking 45 minutes to ship something to less than 5.
Oh, and while everybody's a great fan of filling out a CN22 or a CN23 form in triplicate or whatever,
it's a riveting
massive
experience,
fan.
Right?
It's been a long staple in the post office world, but I'm a big fan of start online, finish in store, especially when it comes to these sorts of transactions. If you as a customer can start at home and get your stuff packaged up, and all you need to do is pay and drop off at the post office or whatever you need to do, that's a fantastic thing also from queue management perspective in the post office. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I did want to ask you about how we're going to handle parcels that are lodged over the post office counter, because not everything that goes into the postal stream is from a significant e-commerce shop. It might even be an eBay seller or something like that, right?
Yep. And see, that's a $1 million question for August 29th. I think this postal world better than I do on how many different systems there are across post offices all over the world. Now, $100 gift exemption, that'll eliminate a decent percentage of those types of shipments.
There'll be a lot of $100 gifts, though, I suspect.
Yeah. Bona fide or not, I don't know. That's the real question.
But that's going to be another thing for us to navigate, though, isn't it? How are you going to approach that when it comes to that limit for $100 gifts? We've seen it in various shapes and forms over the years with different jurisdictions trying to manage the parcel so that they are compliant. But you always know that there's a risk of your consumer, your customer who's walked into your post office might be trying to, avoid taxes or do something like that just to sort of, as we'd say in Australia, pull a Swiftie,
Yep. No, that's it. You left open a small loophole with the gifts, and there's going to be a lot of people classifying their stuff as gifts to try to, fit it in that loophole. So that'll be an interesting one to watch, and one that I'm sure CBP will be paying close attention to. But yeah, the postal counter is probably the most difficult problem to solve. And look, given the timeline, there might be some difficult decisions posts have to make on which packages they're willing to accept out of the gate. And maybe they aren't able to support 100% of the volume coming into the US, but they need just try to salvage as much as they can as they then update their systems to be able to handle that. And that's where, we've got APIs for the calculations and the classifications and everything that can be integrated in all the systems. We're already integrated in with the UPU software as well as the IPC software, talking to many of the other third-party softwares out there that run the retail counters by getting some calculations in there because they can help to facilitate the collection for a number of posts. But the timeline, given the timeline that we've got, it's a massive triage game of like, how do I keep as much volume moving as I can? And we've got a number of solutions that can help. And that's where, our approach, we did some webinars last week. Our approach is like, look, we want to help. Here's some options we've got to help. I don't know every post might have a different recipe of what they need and what their biggest priorities are. And we're there to try to figure out how to keep as much mail moving into the U.S. as we can. And then also we're there to help on the U.S. side and on the remittance piece and making that as simple as possible. For many of these posts, if they've got it and they want to be able to, they're okay just taking care of all the duty collection from all of their customers. We don't have to help in that game. We've got some tools that can, but we don't have to. It could be as simple as we just take on the remittance as that third party, and there's a simple agreement to give us access to your ITMAT data and any other data elements that we need access to, and we're off to the races.
I mean, there are, how can I put this? Different postal operators are at different points along that digital transformation journey as well. So a lot of you listening to this will know that this, you've got, and there's a lot of legacy systems to be updated in various postal networks. And that is part of the challenge. I mean, you've mentioned some of the really attractive stuff like embedding this sort of capability or capacity in the Posts app. Well, a lot of posts are there already. There are a lot of posts that aren't there yet. But I suppose what we should really ask right now is this. I know this is going to sound more like a statement than a question here, Aaron, but my impression from the rhetoric coming out of the White House is that this is a problem that will, not a problem, but this is a situation that will not go away, and it's going to continue to have scrutiny from the president downwards. So you can't, the postal world can't hope that this will just go away. Am I right?
No. Oh, you're 100%. You're 100% right. In fact, I think it's important for the postal community to understand too. There are some in Washington that if the postal volume shut down into the U.S. for a while, they'd be okay with it, right? So it's not like everybody in the world and everybody in D.C. are just looking to keep this volume moving. So from a political standpoint, I don't see it going away. This is something that they're very committed to, just from an overall strategy of these tariffs. They have to have the de minimis shut down, and I think there's in some circles, if that postal volume shut down coming into the U.S. Temporarily, they would be okay with it, and so that's where there's going to be a lot of pressure to, if this isn't working for certain parties. DC will definitely feel a lot of pressure, but I think it'll take a lot for them to retract this position that they have.
And as we've said previously, when I've spoken with other luminaries in the cross-border world, Aaron, where the US leads, other countries often follow. So if the US is now seriously shutting down de minimis effectively, it wouldn't be a surprise to see some other countries follow. So at the risk of editorializing a little bit here, I don't think it'd hurt for everybody to get ready for that sort of eventuality.
That is 100% accurate. In fact, I'd say the U.S. has been a little behind in this game. You've seen Australia and New Zealand and the U.K. and the EU and Norway and Singapore come out with these low-value tax schemes, right, where they put the burden on the seller or on the retailer in the other country to remit. All that was an effect, a way of eliminating the tax de minimis. Now they still have a duty de minimis in these countries, but the EU is already planning to remove that for duties and put that as part of the IOS scheme. So the whole world's trying to find ways to collect this duty and tax revenue on these low value shipments and put different kinds of systems in place. The US is now on board with this, but they're tackling it right at the duty level, which is the more complex side of collection versus tax. And I totally agree. I think duty de minimis around the world are just going to keep coming down. And so to your point, this is just the beginning of all of this. So If I wanted to back up and talk a little bit about the different journey everyone's on from a technical reformation standpoint with the post, there are some simple tools that could be used out of the gate if posts wanted to continue collecting at the counter. This works well for smaller posts that maybe, are a little more intimate with all of their post offices. But the posts themselves could use calculation tools that we have to just do manual calculations on all shipments to the U.S. and just, hand key in the amount they're going to collect without an integration or anything needed. So there's a lot of creative ways, and I think it's going to take a lot of creativity for post to comply and try to keep packages moving. Everything may not be sexy out of the gate, but you got to do what you got to do, and then you can evolve technologically into more robust and scalable systems, which then can just be, as we talked about, I think the rest of the world's going to follow suit. I think those systems can then be used and leveraged for the entire world.
Aaron, we have covered a lot of territory, and I feel like there's still more to be discussed. But given that we've got this deadline coming up very soon, if people want to get in contact with the team at Zonos, what's the best way to get in contact?
So obviously we've got our website, zonos.com. There's links there to reach out. Honestly, feel free to email me directly, aaron@zonos.com. It's an easy email to remember, or look me up on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to get you to the right place. I'll put links to the Zonos website and to Aaron's LinkedIn profile on the episode page on thepostalhub.com. Thepostalhub.com. It's my podcast. I can't even pronounce it correctly. Go to the episode page on the website there. If you're out walking the dog right now, or lazing on a beach, or whatever it is that you're doing right now while you're listening to the Postal Hub, you can go over there and find out the contact details with Zonos. Aaron and the team at Zonos. I think I said Zonos.com, but you all know what I mean. Aaron, it's been great having this conversation with you today on a really important topic. Aaron Bezzant, Head of Supply Chain at Zonos, thank you very much for joining us on the Postal Hub podcast today. Thanks, Ian. Coming soon on the Postal Hub podcast, Guy Pacheco, Chief Financial Officer at CTT, joins us to talk about the transformation of CTT. An interesting discussion not to be missed. And so that you don't miss it, here are some things you should do. You should subscribe to the Postal Hub podcast in your favourite podcast platform. You should subscribe to my email mailing list so you get an email whenever I release a new episode of the Postal Hub podcast. And there are various other things you can do to improve your email inbox, such as signing up for the Daily Delivery Digest or signing up for the monthly Post Office Digest if you're more of a post office person. Go over to thepostalhub.com, and follow the links to sign up over there. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn, you can do that. It costs you nothing, apparently. What great value in amongst all the other rubbish that's on LinkedIn. Oh my goodness, it really has gone downhill lately, hasn't it? Anyway, enough about that. You can follow me on LinkedIn, and hopefully that'll help improve the algorithm or whatever the dickens gets things appearing in your feed over there. You can also follow the Postal Hub podcast on LinkedIn, and if you want to email me, my email address is ian@thepostalhub.com. I'm Ian Kerr. Thanks for listening in, and I look forward to your company next time on the Postal Hub podcast.